Even if you're not the biggest fan of board games, odds are that you've heard about the popular real estate board game, Monopoly. The game, which could go on for hours at a stretch, is well loved by families and friends in the United States and all over the world. Monopoly is the best-selling private patented board game in history. And while you may be familiar with the name Monopoly, and you may have even had your fair share of one of these seemingly endless episodes of Monopoly gameplay, one thing you most likely aren't aware of is the remarkable history that this board game has. According to most popular backstories, the success of Monopoly began sometime in the 1930s, but that isn't the complete story. In reality, the origin of the board game goes back decades before that. This is the surprising story behind the game Monopoly. Welcome to Planet Biz. The Landlord's Game. The idea for the game came to a woman named Elizabeth Lizzie Magie, who worked as a stenographer by day and at night taught classes about her Georgia's political beliefs. It was the early 20th century, and this progressive and intensely political woman believed that she could have an impact on the world by enlightening people on the massive problem of income inequalities and the dangers of monopolies. A monopoly is a market structure characterized by a single seller, selling a unique product in the market without facing any serious competition. To raise awareness, she taught in the evenings, but there was one problem. Her classes were too small. She needed to find a way to reach more people. As a single woman in the early 20th century, such a feat would be considerably difficult for Lizzie Magie to achieve, but she had an idea that was bound to work. Trying to reach more people with her progressive political views, Lizzie Magie decided that the best way to go about that would be to use an interactive and creative medium. The perfect solution must have been strikingly obvious: board games. Back then, board games were becoming more and more popular, especially in middle-class homes. Lizzie began to work on her idea, giving her ideologies the physical form of a board game in a bid to educate more people. Talking about her board game idea in a political magazine, Lizzie said, "It might well have been called the game of life, as it contains all the elements of success and failure in the real world, and the object is the same as the human race seems to have, i.e., the accumulation of wealth." She began to work on her idea each night after she got back from work at the office. At her home in Prince George's County, Washington, D.C., Lizzie would spend hours drawing and redrawing the board game. Eventually, she created a prototype that she found satisfactory and named it the Landlord's Game. The Landlord's Game featured game money, properties that could be bought and sold, a bank from which players could pay for property, get paid, or borrow money, taxes, title deeds, etc. Players could follow a continuous path around the board instead of a linear path, which was more common at the time. The board featured various rectangles representing pieces of land that could be bought when a player lands on it, absolute necessity rectangles that offered things like food and shelter, franchise spaces for light and water, and jail, and the Mother Earth space, where players would get paid wages of $100 whenever they passed because they performed so much labor upon Mother Earth during the course of the game. In 1903, Lizzie applied for a patent for the board game she had invented, and in 1904 she received it. Even with the patent in hand, it wasn't until 1906 that the game was officially published for sale to the public by the Economic Game Company of New York, which Lizzie Magie herself established in partnership with two other people. The game quickly grew popular among particular groups of people such as Quakers, Georgists, college students, and left-wing intellectuals. People began to make varying homemade versions, customizing the game to reflect neighborhoods that they were familiar with. The game had achieved its fair share of popularity, but Lizzie knew it could do better and reach a wider audience. So, around 1910, she went to the game board company, Parker Brothers. Unfortunately, they turned her down, rejecting it as too complicated. In 1913, she got the Landlord's Game published by the Newbie Game Company under the name Brer Fox and Brer Rabbit. In 1924, Magie, now married, made a few tweaks to her game. Wanting to regain control of the widespread homemade versions, she repatented the game under her married name, Elizabeth Magie Phillips. Once again, she approached Parker Brothers with a new game, and yet again, George Parker, the company's founder, turned her down. This time because the game was too political. But despite the rejections, Magie's dream of her game becoming more popular would finally be achieved. Unfortunately, this would have nothing to do with her. While her game became increasingly well known, the progressive, strong-willed woman with the incredible work ethic would fade into obscurity. Monopoly. Despite being turned down for publication by Parker Brothers more than once, the game continued to grow in popularity. Apart from the commercial sales, news of the game spread by word of mouth, and the handmade versions got more and more widespread. It wasn't sold in a box, and its original name wasn't known by most people who played the game. Eventually, the real estate board game became known by all as the Monopoly game. In Philadelphia, a businessman named Charles Todd and his wife Olive Todd were some of the fans of the Monopoly game who were helping to spread the game's popularity by introducing it to their friends. One night in late 1932, Charles and his wife were entertaining their friends, Charles Darrow and his wife Esther Darrow, with the Monopoly game. The Darrow couple loved the game immediately. Charles was pleased with the fact that his friends liked it, so he taught the couple some more advanced rules of the game and even made them their own Monopoly set. It was the height of the Great Depression, and Charles Darrow was an unemployed man without any means to take care of his family. One day, he asked Charles Todd for a written copy of the rules of the Monopoly game. This must have been a strange request because not only was Darrow already familiar with the game, but to the best of Charles Todd's knowledge, there was no written rules in existence. Most people who had learned the game had done so through word of mouth. But Charles Todd complied and wrote down the rules for his friend. Darrow, armed with the board game set and the rules, decided to start selling the game under the name Monopoly. He never spoke to Charles Todd again. Starting out, Darrow made the game sets with the help of his wife and his first son, William Darrow. Charles Darrow would draw the board designs on round pieces of oilcloth using a drafting pen, and his son and wife would color the spaces and make the title deeds and community chest and chance cards. Demand for the game increased, and Darrow hired a printing company which made the board game on square carton sheets. Darrow's design of the board game included design elements that are now fixtures on Monopoly boards everywhere, including the car on the free parking square and the black locomotive on the railroad spaces. In 1933, Darrow received a copyright on his version of the game, and he met with the Milton Bradley Company, a board game manufacturer, attempting to sell the game as his personal invention. His offer was rejected in a letter dated May 1934. Afterwards, Darrow sent the game to Parker Brothers later that same year. The company once again rejected the game, calling it too complicated, too technical. According to them, it also took too long to play. Success. After receiving rejections from the two different board game manufacturers, Darrow continued to sell his board game privately. During the Christmas season of 1934, Darrow had such a successful sales period that Parker Brothers heard about it. Early in 1935, Robert Barton, president of Parker Brothers at the time, called in Darrow for a meeting in New York City. On the 18th of March, the company bought Darrow's game and helped him take out a patent on it. They also bought his entire inventory. The next month, they discovered that he was not the sole inventor of the game, but to protect their right to the game, they got Darrow to sign a legal document saying that he was the game's sole creator. The Parker Brothers marketed the game on a large scale, and its popularity grew and grew. Darrow became popular as the brains behind the game that brought so much joy to friends and family that played it. When asked by a Philadelphia news publication named the Germantown Bulletin how he came up with the game idea out of thin air, Darrow replied, "It's a freak, entirely unexpected and illogical." Darrow's Monopoly went on to sell hundreds of millions of copies, making him the first millionaire game designer in history. His story became a symbol of the American dream, how a man went from abject poverty to immense wealth during the economic crisis. He received royalties throughout his life. Meanwhile, Lizzie Magie faded into obscurity. The only recognition she got was in the mid-1930s when Parker Brothers paid her $500 with no royalties for the patent on the original Landlord's game, as well as two other of her game ideas. When Lizzie discovered the true motives for the Parker Brothers' purchase of her game, she became angry. She gave interviews to the Washington Post and the Washington Evening Star. Still, she wasn't publicly acknowledged, and Darrow remained the face of the popular board game. Today, Monopoly has gone global. The board game is in 114 countries and has been translated to 47 different languages. Also, it is estimated that over 1 billion people have played the game around the world. Monopoly has even become a sport of sorts, with the highly competitive US Monopoly Championship and even World Championships being held. For more inspiring stories, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. This is Planet Biz.